Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to look at one of my rescue orchid. This orchid was given to me by a colleague who actually never watered this orchid since it was purchased. And then it was brought to me in the office, and I think I have a clip of how this orchid looked like coming up, and let's take a look, and then we'll talk about my care for it to bloom. So this is a video clip of what the orchid looked like when I first got it. You could tell that a lot of the flowers were dried up already, and there were two buds still hanging on each flower spike. But in the end, those two buds did not open. It just continued to shrink. This orchid was severely underwatered because it was never watered once it was purchased. But I think for orchids in this kind of stress category is slightly easier to rescue than orchids with root rot problems. So this is after I took it home, and if you just look at the roots, they're actually pretty okay. They're still intact. It's firm, it's thick. The bottom leaf was yellowing. I was able to easily remove it, but the rest, most of the leaves were still pretty sturdy. And I left the flower spike alone. I clip off the tip of the spikes where the flowers were, but I kept most of the spikes intact. And you can see here too, it's a moss, but it was so dry. There was really literally no weight from water or moisture. So it was just an underwater orchid, but it was still very salvageable. So my first step for this orchid was I knew I needed to soak it in water, because in order to really see what's going on inside the cup or inside the media is, remove the moss and see what's happening, right? I didn't really know if this orchid was simply dehydrated due to lack of watering, but then, I didn't know if the media had any potential pests, so I wanted to see what's going on. So I soaked it for about half an hour, and then I removed all the moss, and it was looking pretty okay. Overall, I didn't think that this orchid was in a big trouble or anything. So I, in the end, decided that this orchid should be, I wanted to try water culture with this orchid as an experiment. And initially, it actually responded to water culture very well. And at the time, as you can see here in the video, there were a couple root tips starting to emerge. But inside the media, inside the cup though, a lot of these roots were its old roots. And at the time, I kept the water level fairly low because I wasn't sure if all these old roots would actually like that much water all the time, since I'm using water culture method to try to revive this orchid. Along the process, it continued to lose its bottom two leaves, but that was it. And then it continued to firm up more and more. It grew more roots, and eventually it started to grow new leaves as well. But over time, because I continued to use water culture, over time, all of the older roots, existing roots, gradually died off. They didn't rot at a very fast speed. It just over time they started to degrade, and then one started to go, and then another one started to go, and all the roots that you see here are new roots, like new water roots. But what I couldn't get this orchid to do was to produce more roots. So the roots would grow, but then it's just kind of, it start and then it would grow to maybe about 3 inches and then it would stop growing. And I suspect that it had to do with the fact that at the time it was winter, colder, but then also the humidity in the air was also on the drier side. So the roots just didn't have the right kind of condition to continue to grow into the cup. But thankfully, at the end of 2018, the cool down period still helped this orchid to initiate a flower spike. So I consider that this rescue a success, even though there are only 3 flowers for this orchid this time. And to be honest with you, I thought this orchid was white orchid with pink or / purple lip, but actually it's not. The color is slightly on the yellow side. Not that it's good or bad, it's just that I had a totally wrong expectation of what the flower would look like, that's all. This orchid had always received quarter strength fertilizer, and this year I'm thinking I would increase it to 50% just to see how this orchid does. Another change that I've been thinking about making for this orchid is, instead of water culture, I would use moss as the medium for this orchid, because some of the existing roots, new roots, are still pretty short. So it's gonna be really hard for me to continue to use water culture, because that would really means I'll have to either somehow force the roots into the cup, but then also have to increase the water level to pretty high, relatively high, 70 to 80% of the cup, in order to have those shorter roots to be able to reach the water. And I feel that that's a lot of water consumption, but then also, you know, a significant chunk of the orchid, older stem of the orchid would be in water, and sometimes that's a little dangerous because it could be oversaturated, that could potentially rot up the orchid stem. So I don't know if I want to do that. So I think a moss medium would do the job. And I don't know if I want to do no hole moss with no drainage hole, or I want to do just a traditional moss potting method. I don't know yet, but I would definitely keep you posted once I decide. I really enjoy using water culture method to revive orchids, and I still have a few orchids in water culture continuously, but personally I think that using media for whether it's semi-hydro or just media with drainage hole at the bottom, I think that is more a longer term growing method. And I say that especially for this one, for example, at one point this orchid was doing really well in water culture, but then all the older roots started to die off, which is normal, right? Which is expected. Sometimes older roots, they died off just because it's its own natural progression, but then also because it might have been because that the older roots couldn't quite adapt to the water culture method. But for some reason, this orchid is not really willing to produce more roots than it has. So I'm thinking, even though water culture method is okay with this orchid, I think there could be another method may actually do better. So that's why I feel water culture may not be 100% appropriate for this orchid. Nonetheless, water culture is a fun method, and I think everybody should at least give it a try, just so you know what it's like to grow an orchid in water culture. To me, I think it requires a lot of observation and a lot of adjustments between roots and water based on what you see. So for me, because I have less than 10 orchids in water culture, so it's manageable. I know there are a lot of people purely using water culture as a primary method for their orchids. You have my full respect, because for me, 10 orchids in water culture is already taking me a lot of time to really look at them, making adjustments, pouring water back and forth, let alone, more than 10 orchids in water culture. But anyway, it's a fun method. I'm not saying anything bad about this method. You just have to try it to see if it's something for you and your orchids. Overall, I'm really pleased with this orchid this year. And for any adjustments, any changes that I make to this orchid, I will make other videos to give you updates. Stay tuned. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!